Well, the next presenter, another fine gentleman, Ian MacWilliams, that lots of us know in this room, is the producer of the Mildura-based history project, Frames of History, where film and videotape from St Rasia's past is being collected, restored and published. With more than 50 years media experience, Ian commenced his career in Mildura as STV8 before moving to Melbourne, and has since gained a broad understanding of all facets of television and sound production. I don't know whether you're going to tell your story about going down to STV8 and finding all that footage that they were going to throw out, but you're a marvellous man to have accumulated all that as well. For a large part of his career, Ian managed Labsonics, one of Australia's top audio post studios, creating soundtracks for the film and television, such as The Castle and Halifax and Offspring and Miss Fisher's Murder Mysteries and Rockwiz. These days, alongside Frames of History, Ian continues producing audio and video content for a wide range of commercial clients from his own studios in Melbourne. And as I said previously, if I had to stand here and read out this man's bio, I'd be here all night. Please welcome, and we're very honoured to have Ian MacWilliams. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everybody, and thanks, Mark, for your introduction, and thanks to the organisers of the Chaffey Festival and the Mildura City Council for inviting me here this evening. When I was asked to speak, and knowing what Ken was going to talk about, the power of the glass photographic slides in the very early days of the settlement, I decided to focus on one of the parts of my collection, the Frank Jenner collection. Frank highlighted aspects of life in St Rasia through the 40s, 50s and 60s using the most modern method at that time, 16mm film. Frank Jenner was born in 1894 and grew up on a property at Nichols Point, originally settled by his pioneering parents in 1889. Over his long life, Frank was mostly recognised for his services to the Mildura-based hospital, joining the Hospital Committee of Management in 1939 and serving as president of the committee from 1948 to 1951. It's reported that Frank hated the term philanthropist, but he gave his time to so many charities and worthy causes over his life. Frank's hobby was photography, but as we'll discover this evening, this pastime turned into more than a hobby, and it's left a lasting legacy in terms of the history of St Rasia. I know many of you here tonight are familiar with the journey for Frames of History, but in order to set the scene, I need to outline for you the beginnings of Frames of History, because without the Frank Jenner material, it's hard to say where things may have gone. Glenn Milne and I had discussed for many years the fact that historic moving media, 8mm, 16mm, and later videotape, was constantly disappearing as the older generation passed away and their possessions were thrown away. Both Glenn and I had worked in local media in Mildura on news gathering and publishing, and we knew how precious these images were in recording the history of the district. So it was purely by chance that one night in early 2019, at a meeting held by local tractor enthusiasts, Robert Drysdale projected a piece of old 16mm film for club members. My uncle Col Clark was at that meeting, and chatting with Robert later, Col found out that there was a lot more of film alongside the material he'd seen, and most of it was local from events years gone by. The film had been rescued and put aside by Frank Jenner's niece Kate and was sitting in storage out on a property on 14th Street. Word filtered through to me, and it seemed like something I just had to have a look at. And so that was the spark that set Frames of History away. I won't go into any more detail now, except to mention that without the kind support of Ross Lake, the project would never have got off the ground. I can vividly recall the morning I went out to visit Robert, armed with my film equipment that I'd borrowed from someone in Melbourne, and we pulled the reels of 16mm from suitcases and loaded them up, and were thrilled to see what we had. Many of these reels you're about to see. I've been in media all of my working life, and so the steps to restore and publish the film weren't all that difficult for me. A few of the steps, such as writing scripts and doing research, were a bit of a challenge, but they've now become part of the project, alongside the occasional bit of public speaking. So I set about digitising and preparing the first of these films for publication. The earliest piece from Frank's collection focused on a topic that he knew well, as he'd grown up on a fruit block. This one's in black and white. Most of the material we have is in colour. This film I've called Working a Block in the 1940s. So apart from the roles of 16mm film, there were some other items in the suitcases which really at that time didn't mean much to me. For example, there were rolls of unexposed film with ABC labels on them. These had obviously been supplied to Frank, but had never been used. So over time, I've come to the conclusion that Frank was what is called a stringer or a freelance cameraman, supplying footage of local events to news outlets. So these rolls of film, being a stringer for the ABC News, places us somewhere after 1956 when television started. However, I believe Frank was shooting film used for news way earlier than that. Of course, without a way of copying the film like we do today, we can copy in many, many times over. The film was sent away to the news outlet, leaving him often with very little or nothing of the event that he'd covered. Some stories seemed a bit short on footage when we looked at them, but others were way longer. like this one covering the 1949 Henley on the Murray and Queen of the Murray events, where I believe Frank was involved. The black and white footage is from a Cinetone newsreel that I came across, and the colour footage section is what I found amongst Frank's collection.
Mildura goes gay with a colourful procession to herald the Silver Jubilee Henley on the Murray, and a crowd of 7,000 cheers, gaily decorated floats, and lots of attractive girls as they parade through the streets. And all the floats aren't in the streets. On the Murray, the regatta gets underway with crews from Victoria and South Australia competing. What's this? Girls rowing? Must be the maiden fours. Yes, they may be able to race, but they're not in the race with these girls. They're Queen of the Murray candidates, 15 beauties from towns in 3 states. Mildura's orchards are known throughout Australia, but peaches like this still have to be seen to be believed. Excitement grows as girls parade before the judges. Here's Miss Mildura, Iris Ashcroft. The competition's mighty keen, she doesn't get a place. Now the big moment. Here she is, the winner, Esther Bridley of Redcliffs. She's Queen of the Murray 1949. And with contestants as lovely as these to beat, that really means something. The presentation is made by the Mayor, Councillor Pentreath. From the tip of her toes to the top of her head, Esther's every inch a queen.
Another amazing find is footage of the Queen's visit to Sunraysia in 1954. Now, this is one of the occasions where I believe most of what Frank shot would have been sent off to news outlets. However, there was enough film left behind to make this clip, and I had a lot of help from a well-known personality in Mildura, Bruce McLean.
Queen Elizabeth tramped through red, dusty soil on a 16-acre irrigation property to see how dried fruit is grown and prepared. The Queen's white toe peeper shoes were coated with dust when she finished a 30-minute inspection, but she smiled and told Mr. Nat Barclay, the property owner, "What does it matter? I thoroughly enjoyed it all." She spoke for other members of the party too. It was a gay day. Mr. Barclay, a former Country Party member of the Victorian Legislative Assembly, comes from County Armagh and still retains his Irish accent and charm. He had made no special preparations for the visit because the district was anxious for the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh to see a typical small return serviceman fruit block working normally. 4 pickers stripped fruit from vines for the Queen. Then Mr. Barclay explained the dipping and drying processes as workers handled the grapes. Queen Elizabeth turned and spotted several tour officials with their mouths full of grapes. She smiled and shook a finger as they hastily thrust bunches of grapes behind them, like boys caught in the pantry. It was that sort of a day. In the 2.5-hour visit, the royal pair drove over 38 miles of gaily decorated streets and roadways from Mildura Airport to Mildura and nearby Red Cliffs, and then back to the airport. The dais where the President of Mildura Shire, Councillor J.R. Gordon, presented the loyal address was decorated with district products. It was erected on the corner of Deakin Avenue and 8th Street, Mildura, and surrounded by flowers, a great spectacle for all who'd come to see the royal couple. More than 65,000 people lined the routes in Sunraysia and seemed to cheer louder and longer than any other Victorian crowds because they knew it was the last time Her Majesty would be in Victoria for many years. Civic buildings and private buildings alike were decorated in royal colours to welcome the Queen and the Duke to Sunraysia. As they stepped aboard the royal aircraft, the Queen and Duke looked back and waved a cheery farewell to around 5,000 people who had assembled. It was a fitting and most memorable farewell visit for Queen Elizabeth to Victoria. As she was leaving, the Queen told the Premier, Mr. Kane, that she had enjoyed every moment of her visit to Mildura and Victoria.
The next clip is from an event the following year in 1955, the Mardi Gras. And once again, I've been able to find a commercial coverage from this event. And the first material is taken from the corner of Deakin Avenue and 8th Street. And then I believe Frank moved down between 9th and 10th Streets to shoot what we found in the suitcase, which is the colour footage you'll see. One thing to look out for in this clip is the dais used for presentations. It's the same one you just saw in that clip a moment ago. And the City Council obviously erected it this year before presenting the Queens of the Murray down on the riverfront. The fruit's gone, of course.
Mildura on the Victoria-New South Wales border holds its first raisin festival, and the city goes gay. Floats depict the residents' dependency on dried fruits. Now, these fellas are obviously nuts. Australia's dried fruit industry began in the 1880s, which was just about the time these models were in their prime. Now they've come to town with a bang. And not far behind is an ancient bullock wagon, the type of transport which took the pioneers in to open up this country. This is a reminder of Mildura's romantic past. Paddle steamers still ply Old Man Murray, and on the shore, Mildura prepares for the crowning of the Queen of the Raisin Festival. For the winner, 19 years old, Shirley Smith, there's a sash and a cup presented by tennis star Frank Sedgman. A current favorite becomes Raisin Queen.
I must say it's always a thrill for me to watch those Mardi Gras clips. I see my crazy father running along beside Genevieve, which was Washington Motors T-model Ford. So whenever I see a Mardi Gras, I've watched with a lot of memories from Dad in those clips. One of the most dominant news events, of course, in Sunraysia was the 1956 flood, and Frank would no doubt have covered this for many news outlets, but amongst the collection we found some shots taken across the district. We're told that some of the footage was taken around the Jenner property at Nichols Point. As I mentioned earlier, Frank Jenner was heavily involved in the Mildura Base Hospital, and so it wasn't surprising to find a comprehensive coverage of the building of the Mildura Nurses' Home amongst the collection. Strangely, information on this topic was hard to find, and so in my commentary I decided to focus on some of the methods used in the building's construction, seeing as Frank has covered it so well. An interesting discovery is that Frank himself appears a number of times in this film, obviously in his role as a hospital committee member. In the early 1950s, cameraman Frank Jenner shot 16mm film of the construction of the Mildura Nurses' Home. During his life, Frank was a prominent figure in the organising committee of the Mildura Base Hospital, and so no doubt took a special interest in this project. The building, comprising of 149 rooms, was set to be constructed on a 4-acre site adjacent to the hospital, which up until that time had been a fruit block. A gathering on the vacant site had the plans on display for a group including hospital matron Rachel Wilson. And then the first peg was driven home as construction officially began. Before work on the building proper could commence, water and sewerage lines needed to be laid. Trenches were dug by hand with not one piece of heavy earth-moving equipment to be seen. Scenes like this were common across the district in the 1950s as homes and businesses gradually connected to Mildura's new water treatment facility. The building would be made of concrete, all boxed in timber and mixed on site. And here we can see preparation for the pouring of the floor. Behind the site is a large concrete mixer with piles of sand and gravel ready to go. With the ground floor in place, support columns are being boxed up, ready for concrete to be poured. Steel reinforcing is cut and shaped to add strength. As the building rose, mixed concrete was elevated, and then one barrow at a time poured in place. Back before prefabricated slabs, concrete was laid and finished one section at a time, a tough job in Mildura's hot summer. As the building took shape, brickwork was added, and then above the top floor, wooden rafters and battens put in place to hold the metal roof. Once completed, cream bricks would be added across the entire building, typical of buildings from the 1950s and 60s. Frank's footage now takes us to official openings of the new nurses' home. A foundation stone was laid in 1951 by Victorian Premier the Honourable J.G.B. MacDonald. And then in 1953, the home was officially opened by the acting Premier of Victoria, Mr. Frank Galvin. Other officials attending openings were Health Minister Mr. Barry and Chairman of Victorian Hospitals Commission, Mr. Villy. A large ceramic mural by Douglas Anand was commissioned in 1952 and installed in 1953 beside the central door. The work, comprised of 63 square tiles, was 2.5 by 3.1 metres. This mural is now stored at Mildura Arts Centre, after the nurses' home building was sadly demolished in 2008. So after many years of shooting film, Frank had built up quite a collection, and we're told that he used to conduct film nights around the district at fundraising events. Many of us can no doubt remember a world without TV and the internet, so an evening of movie film was unusual entertainment. Without sound on any of the film Frank shot, one can imagine that he commentated each of the films that he ran back then. Here's a sequence he put together on the annual harvest. The last film I'll show you was obviously a very popular one in the 1960s. Dawn Fraser and some fellow swim stars for the 1961 Olympics visited Mildura for an exhibition at the Olympic pool. For this one, Frank went to the trouble of adding graphics to the film and no doubt had all the details for his audience as he ran it. This film actually ran very long, but this is the shorter version. And once again, I've added some music and some information for publication.
Following the excitement of the recent Olympic Games in 1960, a group of medal-winning swimmers put on a special event at Mildura's Olympic swimming pool in 1961. No doubt the main draw card of the day would have been Australia's freestyle champion Dawn Fraser. Across her career, Dawn won 8 Olympic medals, including 4 gold and 6 Commonwealth Games gold medals. She also held 39 records. The 100-metre freestyle record was hers for 15 years from 1956 to 1972. Alongside Dawn in Mildura was Cornelia Maria Cocky van Igelsdorp Gastelaars, a Dutch swimmer who twice improved the world record in the women's 100-metre freestyle in 1956. Cornelia had recently competed in the 1960 Olympic Games. Also from Holland was Cornelia Hendrika Corrie Schimmel, who had won a gold and silver medal at the 1958 European Championships and had also competed in the 1960 Olympics in the 400-metre freestyle event. Mildura's Olympic swimming pool was built in 1955 in light of the 1956 Olympic Games, which were held in Melbourne the following year. Apart from those who treated swimming seriously and trained regularly, thousands of children from across Sunraysia flocked to the pool each year, making it their source of cool recreation across the long, hot summer. Having put in some laps and entertaining the crowd, it was time for Dawn and the other swimming celebrities to say farewell. This had been an event that would remain in the memories of those who attended for years to come.
The Frank Jenner collection of films has served Sunraysia in many ways. It enabled an audience outside the district to witness local events via cinema newsreels and early television news services. Locally, it entertained audiences in church halls and scout halls, helping to raise money for worthy causes. And all these years later, following its discovery and using the internet and social media, it's taking a wide audience back in time to the early days of the district's history. I've found it an honour to have been given the opportunity of restoring and publishing these films on Frank Jenner's behalf. A big thanks to Frank Jenner.
Thank you very much.